God is with Joseph. Genesis 47-50. The word letter V mean and indicates to a word verse. For an examples, the word V1 means verse 1 and the word VS mean verse 2. To God be the glory. Chapter 47. Jacob and his sons meet Pharaoh. V1 So Joseph went to Pharaoh. He said to him, My father and my brothers have come from Canaan. They have brought their sheep and their cows and all their possessions. They are now in Goshen. V2 Joseph had chosen 5 out of his brothers and he introduced them to Pharaoh. V3 Pharaoh said to Joseph's brothers, What is your occupation? And they said to Pharaoh, Your servants keep animals. Our fathers did the same thing. V4 They said to Pharaoh, We have come to this land because there is no food for your servants' sheep. The lack of food is serious in our own country, Canaan. And now, please, let your servants live in Goshen. V5 Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, So your father and your brothers have come to you. V6 The land of Egypt is in front of you. Let your father and your brothers live in the best part of the land. Let them live in Goshen. And if you know any capable men among them, let them look after my cows. Verse 2. Perhaps Joseph took only 5 brothers because the other brothers were looking after the animals. Or perhaps Pharaoh did not allow more than 5 foreigners to visit him at one time. Verse 3. Your servants keep animals. See Genesis 46:34 and the comment. Verse 4. Please let your servants live in Goshen. Joseph had already said that they should live in Goshen. And Pharaoh had made Joseph the ruler of all Egypt. Therefore, Joseph had the authority to make that decision. But it was right that they should ask Pharaoh to agree. Verse 6. Let them look after my cows. Pharaoh offered employment to some of Jacob's family. Pharaoh expected that they would mix with the Egyptian people. But they did not mix. About 400 years after this time, they were still separate. See Exodus 1:8-9. V7 Then Joseph brought Jacob his father and he introduced him to Pharaoh. And Jacob blessed Pharaoh. V8 Pharaoh said to Jacob, How many are the years of your life? V9 And Jacob said to Pharaoh, The years that I have stayed on the earth are 130 years. The years of my life have been few and evil. They have been fewer than the years of my fathers who were before me. V10 And Jacob blessed Pharaoh. And he went out from Pharaoh. V11 Then Joseph gave a place to live to his father and to his brothers. He gave them a possession in Egypt. It was in the best part of the country. It was in the region that is called Ramses. That was as Pharaoh had commanded. V12 And Joseph provided food for his father and for his brothers. He provided enough food for all the people who lived in his father's house. Verse 9. Jacob changed Pharaoh's word life. See verse 8. Instead, he said, I have stayed on the earth. He meant that it was a temporary stay. Jacob knew that his stay on the earth was temporary. After it, he would be with his fathers and with God. Jacob called 130 years few. It was less than his father Isaac's life, which was 180 years. But it was not few years. We can only guess why Jacob called 130 years few. The Egyptians did not live for so many years. Jacob did not say, We live for more years than you do. To say that would be not to respect Pharaoh. So he said, The years of my life have been few. Jacob calls his life evil. Perhaps this is to respect Pharaoh. He does not say, I have lived a better life than you have. Instead, he says the opposite. But this also has another meaning. Jacob remembers that he has done many things that were wrong. For example, he cheated his brother Esau and his father Isaac. See Genesis 27:19. And he cheated Laban. See Genesis 31:20. And Jacob had much trouble in his life. Verse 11. When Jacob initially decided to go to Egypt, he expected to go for a short time. He expected to stay in Egypt until the famine was over. He did not expect to own property in Egypt. But Joseph gave them land as a possession. This was part of God's plan. He intended to make them a great nation. So their descendants would live in Egypt for about 400 years. Ramses was the name of a part of the region Goshen. Joseph sells grain to the people. v13 Now there was no food in all the country. The famine was very bad. It ruined all Egypt and it ruined all Canaan. v14 And Joseph gathered all the money that was in Egypt and in Canaan. People gave it to him when they bought grain. And Joseph brought the money into Pharaoh's house. v15 And the inhabitants of Egypt and the inhabitants of Canaan spent all the money that they had. Then the inhabitants of Egypt came to Joseph. They said, "Give us food. If you do not do so, we will die. We will die because we have spent all our money." v16 And Joseph answered, "Give me your animals. I will take your animals and I will give food to you. I will do that because you have no money." v17 So they brought their animals to Joseph. And Joseph took the animals and he gave food to the people. Joseph took their horses, their sheep, their cows, and their donkeys. He took their animals and he gave food to them during all that year. Verses 14 to 17. Joseph did not do this himself. He had appointed managers, who organized the work. See Genesis 41:34. And the managers had many servants, who helped them. The managers and their servants gathered the money. And the people did not bring the animals to Joseph himself. They brought them to the managers and to their servants. They did not take the animals away from the people. They let the people keep the animals. But the animals belonged to Pharaoh. v18 So that year ended. And in the next year, the people came to Joseph. They said to him, "We will not hide from our master that we have spent all our money. All our animals belong to you, our master. We have nothing else that we can give to our master except our bodies and our lands." v19 It is not right that we and our land should die. Take us and take our land. And give food to us. We will be Pharaoh's slaves and our land shall belong to Pharaoh. And give us seed so that we may sow it. So we may live and not die. And so the land may not become a desert. v20 So Joseph bought all the land in Egypt for Pharaoh. All the inhabitants of Egypt sold their fields, because the famine was so bad. The land became Pharaoh's. v21 And Joseph made the people slaves in all Egypt. v22 But Joseph did not buy the land of the priests, because Pharaoh gave to them a regular payment. The priests lived on the payment that Pharaoh gave to them. Therefore, the priests did not sell their land. Verse 18. Perhaps some of the people came to Joseph himself. But usually they went to the managers. The managers reported to Joseph and Joseph sent instructions to the managers. Verses 20 to 21. The land became Pharaoh's property. The people became slaves and they too belonged to Pharaoh. So Pharaoh became more powerful. But the people continued to farm the land, as they had done before. Their lives did not change when they became slaves. v23 Then Joseph said to the people, "I have bought you and your land for Pharaoh. Now I give seed to you. Sow the seed on the land." v24 And at the harvests, you shall give a part of the crops to Pharaoh. You shall give to Pharaoh 1 part in every 5 parts. And 4 parts in every 5 parts shall be your own. It shall be seed for the field. And it shall be food for yourselves and for your families and for your children. v25 And the people said, "You have saved us and we are still alive. We will be slaves to Pharaoh, if that pleases you, our master." v26 So Joseph made a law, which still stands in Egypt. The law says that Pharaoh should have 1 part in every 5 parts. Only the priest's land did not become Pharaoh's. Verse 25. Joseph made big changes in Egypt. And the people realized that they benefited from these changes. They benefited because they had enough food during the famine. And they realized that they would also have enough food during future famines. Therefore, they were willing to become slaves. Nowadays, the word slaves means people who are not free. A slave is a person who belongs to another person. That is a very evil thing. But slaves in ancient Egypt were different. They farmed the land and they lived in an ordinary way. But, because they were slaves, they did not manage their own affairs. Pharaoh's servants told the people what they should do. And they told the people when they should sow their seeds. Pharaoh's servants managed the farming in the whole country. This was an advantage for the people. The reason was that farming was difficult in Egypt. Egypt has a very dry climate. There is not enough rain for the crops. So people had to use water from the river Nile to water the crops. And they needed canals to bring the water from the river. Pharaoh and his servants managed all this. And they stored grain in case there was a famine. They could do these things better than the separate farmers could do them. Verse 26. The law still stood at the time when people wrote Genesis. Joseph's law remained after Joseph's death. So there would still be a store of food in case there was a famine. Joseph's promise to Jacob. V27 Israel and his family lived in Egypt. They lived in the district that is called Goshen. They gained possessions in it. They had large families and they increased greatly. V28 And Jacob lived in Egypt for 17 years. So Jacob's life was 147 years. V29 And when the time of Israel's death was near, he called his son Joseph. He said to him, If now you are pleased with me, put your hand under my leg. Promise that you will be honest and true toward me. Do not bury me in Egypt, V30 But let me lie with my fathers. Carry my body out of Egypt. Bury me in the place where people buried my fathers. Joseph answered, I will do as you have said. V31 And Israel said, Make a firm promise to me. And Joseph made a firm promise to him. Then Israel bent himself down over the head of his bed. Verse 29. If you are pleased with me. This is not what the father of the family would say to his son. The son should respect and obey his father. But Joseph was not only Jacob's son. Joseph was also the ruler of the whole country where Jacob was staying. So Jacob gave honor to Joseph. And Joseph gave honor to Jacob, because he was his father. Put your hand under my leg. This was a sign of an important promise. See Genesis 24:2. Chapter 48. Jacob blesses Joseph's sons. V1 After this, Joseph heard that his father was ill. So he went to his father and he took with him his two sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. V2 And someone said to Jacob, Your son Joseph has come to you. Then, by an effort, Israel sat up in his bed. V3 And Jacob said to Joseph, God, who can do anything, appeared to me at Luz. That is in the land that is called Canaan. He blessed me. V4 And he said to me, I will make you have large families. I will make you have many descendants. I will make from you a group of peoples. And I will give this land to your descendants who shall be after you. They shall possess it for all ages. Verse 2. Israel was the same person as Jacob. Verse 3. Luz was the same place as Bethel. See Genesis 28:19. Verse 4. Jacob reminded Joseph about God's promise. See Genesis 35:11-12. God had given the country that is called Canaan to Jacob's descendants. He gave it to them so that they should possess it for all ages. Therefore, they should not always live in Egypt. They lived in Egypt for 400 years. And after that time God led them back to Canaan. V5 Jacob continued, And now your two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, shall be mine. They were born to you here in this country, Egypt, before I came here. But they shall be called my sons, as Reuben and Simeon are my sons. V6 And the children who shall be born to you after them shall be called your sons. When they come to their own land, they shall be called by their brothers' names. V7 When I came from Paddan, Rachel died during the journey. I was very sad that she died. She died in Canaan, when we were still some distance from Ephrath. I buried her there on the way to Ephrath, which is called Bethlehem. Verse 5. Your 2 sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, shall be mine. Later, the tribes had the names of Jacob's sons. But 2 tribes were called the tribe of Ephraim and the tribe of Manasseh. And Ephraim and Manasseh were not actually Jacob's sons. They were actually Jacob's grandsons. So Ephraim and Manasseh were called Jacob's sons. Verse 6. They shall be called by their brothers' names. Joseph's later sons would not give their names to tribes. Their descendants would be part of the tribe of Ephraim and the tribe of Manasseh. V8 Then Israel saw Joseph's sons. And he said, Who are these? V9 Joseph said to his father, These are my sons, whom God has given to me here. And Israel said, Bring them to me, please, so that I may bless them. V10 Now Israel's eyes were weak because of his age, so that he could not see. So Joseph brought them near to him. And Israel kissed them and he hugged them. V11 And Israel said to Joseph, I did not expect to see your face. But God has let me see your children also. V12 Then Joseph took the children from Israel's knees. And he bent himself down with his face to the earth. V13 And Joseph took the 2 children. He took Ephraim in his right hand toward Israel's left hand. And he took Manasseh in his left hand toward Israel's right hand. And he brought them near to Israel. V14 And Israel reached out his right hand and he put it on Ephraim's head. But Ephraim was the younger son. And Israel reached out his left hand and he put it on Manasseh's head. But Manasseh was the older son. So Israel held one arm across the other arm. Verse 10. Probably Israel could see that 2 people were with Joseph. But he could not see clearly. He could not recognize them until they were close to him. Verse 11. For many years, Jacob thought that Joseph was dead. See Genesis 37:33. That was why he did not expect to see Joseph's face. Verse 12. Children does not mean young children. They were more than 19 years of age. These are the reasons why we know that. They were born before the famine began. See Genesis 41:50. Jacob came to Egypt 2 years after the famine began. See Genesis 45:6. And Jacob lived for 17 more years. See Genesis 47:9-28. So we can be sure that Joseph's sons did not sit on Israel's knees. They stood by his knees. Verse 13. And he took Manasseh toward Israel's right hand. Joseph did this so that Jacob would put his right hand on Manasseh's head. So Jacob would give to Manasseh the right of the oldest son. Verse 14. Jacob knew that Ephraim's descendants would be greater than Manasseh's descendants. See verse 19. God told him this. V15 And Israel blessed them. He said, My fathers Abraham and Isaac lived in front of God's face. And God has led me through all my life to this day. V16 He is the angel who has rescued me from all evil things. He shall bless these boys. They shall be called by my name. And by the name of my fathers Abraham and Isaac. Let them increase greatly on the earth. Verse 16. Jacob called God the angel who has rescued me. God had appeared several times as an angel. For example, see Genesis 31:11. V17 Joseph saw that his father put his right hand on Ephraim's head. That did not please Joseph. He took his father's hand so as to move it from Ephraim's head to Manasseh's head. V18 And Joseph said to his father, No, my father. This one is the older son. Put your right hand on his head. V19 But his father refused. And he said, I know, my son. I know. He also shall become a nation and he also shall be great. But his younger brother shall be greater than he shall. And his family shall become many nations. V20 So Israel blessed them that day. He said, The nation of Israel will use your names when they bless people. They will say, Let God make you as Ephraim and as Manasseh. So Israel made Ephraim more important than Manasseh. V21 Then Israel said to Joseph, I shall die very soon, but God will be with you. he will bring you back to the country where your fathers lived. v22 Moreover I give Shechem to you rather than to your brothers. I took it from the Amorites with my sword and with my bow. Verses 17 to 18. Joseph thought that Jacob had made a mistake because of his weak side. Verse 20. The nation of Israel means Israel's descendants. They are still called Israel nowadays. Verse 22. Perhaps this refers to Genesis 34:25-29. That city was called Shechem. And the son of the chief man of the city was also called Shechem. Jacob did not take the city himself, but his sons, Simeon and Levi, took it. Perhaps Jacob meant that he had the responsibility as their father. For Amorites, see Genesis 10:16 and the comment on that verse. Many years after this, people buried Joseph at Shechem. See Joshua 24:32. They buried him in the piece of land that Jacob had bought. See Genesis 33:19. Chapter 49. Jacob blesses his sons. v1 Then Jacob called his sons. He said to them, Gather yourselves together. I will tell you what shall happen to you in the future. Verses 1 to 27. Before Jacob died, he gave his blessing as the father of the family. A father's blessing was very important. See Isaac's blessing in Genesis 27:26-40. God told Jacob what he should say. Therefore, the things that Jacob said were true. And Jacob said things that actually happened many years later. After this time, Jacob's descendants lived in Egypt for 400 years. The descendants of each of Jacob's sons became a tribe. Then they returned to the country that is called Canaan. And each tribe obtained land in Canaan. Many parts of this blessing refer to those lands. The names in this chapter sometimes mean Jacob's sons. And sometimes they mean the tribes, which were the descendants of Joseph's sons. In verses 3 to 7, the names usually mean the sons. After verse 8 the names mean the tribes. Many Hebrew words in this chapter are difficult to understand. We cannot be sure what they mean. These are likely meanings, but some of these meanings are not certain. v2 Come near to me and listen, Jacob's sons. Listen to Israel your father. v3 Reuben, you are my oldest son. You are my strength and you have come out of my strength. You are very proud and you are very powerful. v4 But you flow as water flows. You shall not be first. Because you had sex with your father's extra wife. You did a very wrong thing. You went into my bed. Verse 4. You flow as water flows. A person cannot lean on water because the water moves. So this means, a person cannot trust you. You shall not be first. Before this time, Reuben had the right of the oldest son. Jacob said that Reuben would not keep that right. But this verse does not only mean that Reuben himself would not be first. It refers to Reuben himself, but it also refers to Reuben's tribe. Reuben's tribe would not lead the other tribes. Judah's tribe would lead them. You had sex. See Genesis 35:22. v5 Simeon and Levi are brothers. They make plans for deeds of war. v6 I do not join in with their plans. I do not go with them. They are angry and they kill men. They are fierce and they kill animals. v7 Their anger is evil, because it is so fierce. Their deeds are wicked, because they are so cruel. I will divide them in Jacob, and I will scatter them in Israel. Verses 5 to 6. They use their swords. Simeon and Levi attacked the men in Shechem. See Genesis 34:25-26. I do not agree. Jacob told them that their deed was wrong. See Genesis 34:30. Verse 7. I will divide them in Jacob and I will scatter them in Israel. This does not refer to Simeon and Levi themselves. It refers to the tribes of Simeon and Levi. When those tribes reached their own country, they did not receive land. The tribe of Simeon shared land with the tribe of Judah. So God divided the land for them. See Joshua 19:9. The tribe of Levi lived among all the other tribes. So God scattered them in Israel. See Joshua 13:14. v8 Judah, your brothers shall praise you. Your hand shall be on your enemies' necks. Your father's sons shall bend themselves down in front of you. v9 Judah is like a young lion. You have returned with the animal that you killed, my son. You prepare to attack and you lie down like a lion. You are like a female lion. Nobody dares to wake you. v10 There shall always be a king in Judah. There shall always be a ruler in the tribe of Judah. Then he shall receive the things that belong to him. All the peoples must obey him. v11 He shall tie his donkey to the vine. He shall tie a young donkey to the red vine. He washes his clothes in wine. He washes his coat in the new wine. v12 His eyes shall be darker than wine. His teeth shall be whiter than milk. Verse 8. Judah means Judah himself, and it also means the tribe of Judah. But the verses that follow refer to the tribe of Judah. Judah was not the oldest son. But Jacob blessed Judah as if he was the oldest son. And the tribe of Judah later became the most important tribe. Verse 10. Later, there were many kings in the tribe of Judah. David and Solomon were two famous ones. Jesus too is a king, and he also is a member of the tribe of Judah. Verse 11. A vine is a plant. People make wine out of the fruits of vines. This verse probably means that there would be plenty. If one ties a donkey to a vine, the donkey will eat the grapes. Grapes are the fruits of the vine. One would only do that if there were plenty of grapes. This verse probably also means that there would be peace. A king would ride on a donkey if he came in peace. That was the custom. Otherwise he would ride on a horse or in a chariot. When Jesus entered Jerusalem, he rode on a donkey. See Matthew 21:5. v13 Zebulun shall live at the sea's shore. He shall become a harbor for ships. And his border shall be at Sidon. v14 Issachar is like a strong donkey, which lies in the sheep's pens. v15 He sees that his home is good, and that the land is pleasant. So he lifts up his load, and he becomes a willing worker. Verse 13. Jacob blessed his first four sons Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah in the order of their birth. He blessed the other 8 sons in a different order. The order of their birth was this: Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, Issachar, Zebulun, Joseph, Benjamin. The tribe of Zebulun later possessed land in the north part of Canaan. The edge of their land that was towards the west was near the coast. Sidon is there. The east edge of their land reached to the big lake that is called the Sea of Galilee. They used ships on the sea and on the lake. Most of Jacob's descendants did not use ships. Verses 14 to 15. The tribe of Issachar would have land that was good for farming. They would work hard on their land. v16 Dan shall be a judge for his people. They shall be as the other families in Israel. v17 Dan shall be like a snake on the way. He shall be like a snake that waits by the path. It bites the horse's feet, so that the rider falls from the horse. v18 I wait until you save me, Lord. v19 Robbers shall attack Gad, but he shall attack them from behind. v20 Asher shall eat good food every day. He shall provide food that is for a king. v21 Naphtali is a wild animal that goes free. Its young ones are lovely. Verse 17. A small snake can overcome a large horse. So the tribe of Dan will be a small tribe, but it will be powerful. Verse 19. The tribe of Gad would have land east of the river Jordan. So robbers might come from the desert in the east. The tribe would be too small to fight a battle, and so they might attack from behind. Verse 20. The tribe of Asher would have land where crops grow well. Verse 21. The meaning of the Hebrew language in this verse is not certain. Perhaps it means that the tribe of Naphtali would be peaceful people. v22 Joseph is like a young wild donkey. He is like a young donkey, which is drinking at a pool. He is like a young donkey by the side of a rock. v23 Those who use bows attack him fiercely. They shoot arrows at him in order to kill him. v24 But the bow broke. The strong arms trembled. The hand of the strong one of Jacob helps him. The keeper, who is Israel's rock, supports him. v25 You stand by your father's God, who helps you. The God who can do anything blesses you. He blesses you from heaven that is above. He blesses you from the deep place that is underneath. He blesses the mothers and their children. v26 Your father's blessings are strong. They are stronger than the high mountains. They are stronger than the hills that last for all ages. Let these blessings be on Joseph's head. He was a prince over his brothers. Verse 22. The tribe of Joseph was usually called the two tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh. Ephraim and Manasseh were Joseph's sons. The meaning of the Hebrew words in this verse is doubtful. Some people translate it as, Joseph is a branch with fruit, which is near to a pool. But this is not likely. People do not shoot arrows at trees. Verses 22 to 24. If the translation donkey is right, these verses mean this. Joseph is in a dangerous place. One can shoot a wild donkey when it is drinking. It cannot hide itself when it is by a rock. So people attack Joseph's descendants, but God protects them. He makes the strong arms of the attacker weak. v27 Benjamin is a hungry wild dog. In the morning, he eats what he has killed. In the evening, he shares the things that he has taken. v28 These are the 12 tribes of Israel. And their father said these words to his sons as he blessed them. He blessed each one with the blessing that was suitable for him. Verse 27. The Hebrew word for wild dog means wolf. A wolf is a fierce wild dog that hunts in groups. In later times, the tribe of Benjamin were fierce people. They fought a war against the other descendants of Israel. See Judges 20:12-48. And they were skillful fighters. See for example 1 Chronicles 12:2. Verse 28. The 12 tribes of Israel means the descendants of each of Israel's 12 sons. Jacob dies. v29 Then Jacob commanded his sons. He said to them, I will soon go to be with my fathers. Bury me in the cave where people buried my fathers. The cave is in the field of Ephron the Hittite. v30 It is in the field at Machpelah. It is east of Mamre, in Canaan. Abraham bought the field and the cave from Ephron the Hittite. He bought it so as to use it as a grave. v31 There they buried Abraham and Sarah his wife. There they buried Isaac and Rebekah his wife. And there I buried Leah. v32 Abraham bought the field from the Hittites. And he bought the cave that is in the field. v33 Then Jacob finished commanding his sons. He drew his feet up into his bed and he died. So he went to be with his fathers. Verse 29. Jacob's real home was the country that was called Canaan. Egypt was only a temporary home for Jacob's descendants. That was important. God had promised to Abraham that his descendants would live in Canaan. See Genesis 12:7, 13:15, 15:7 and 17:18. So Joseph must bury Jacob in Canaan. And Jacob's descendants would live in Egypt for only 400 years. After that time, they would return to Canaan. Verse 30. Genesis 23:17-18 tells how Abraham bought the field and the cave. Chapter 50. Joseph buries his father. v1 Then Joseph bent himself down over his father's face. He wept over him and he kissed him. v2 And Joseph told his servants the doctors to embalm his father's body. So the doctors embalmed Israel's body. v3 They did that in 40 days, because 40 days are necessary to embalm a body. And the Egyptians wept for him 70 days. Verses 2-3. To embalm means to put special substances on a dead body and in it. These substances keep the body in a good state. A dead body that people have embalmed is called a mummy. It lasts for very many years. The Egyptians used to embalm the bodies of important people who had died. v4:5 And when the days for weeping were over, Joseph spoke to Pharaoh's servants. He said, "If you are pleased with me, please speak to Pharaoh. Please tell Pharaoh that my father made me give a firm promise. He said to me, I will die soon. Bury me in the grave that I bought in Canaan. Therefore, please let me go to bury my father. After I do that, I will return." v6 And Pharaoh answered, "Go. Bury your father. Do what you promised to him." Verses 4-5. Joseph did not speak to Pharaoh, but he sent a message. We do not know why he did not speak to Pharaoh himself. Perhaps he did not approach Pharaoh because he had touched Jacob's dead body. After I do that, I will return. Jacob promised to Pharaoh that he would return to Egypt. He would not take the opportunity to move his home back to Canaan. v7 So Joseph went to bury his father. And all Pharaoh's servants went with Joseph. The leaders of Pharaoh's court went, and all the important inhabitants of Egypt went. v8 Joseph's brothers went. Joseph's servants and his father's servants went. Only the children and the sheep and the cows stayed in Goshen. v9 And chariots and horsemen also went with Joseph. Very many people went together. v10 They came to the farm of Adad, which was near the river Jordan. They stopped there and they wept loudly and bitterly. There Joseph wept for his father for 7 days. v11 The Canaanites, who lived in the region, saw the weeping at the farm of Adad. They said, "The inhabitants of Egypt weep bitterly." Therefore, they called the place Abel Mizraim. It is near the river Jordan. v12 And so Jacob's sons did for him as he had commanded them. v13 They carried him to his own country, Canaan. And they buried him in the cave that is at Machpelah. It is east of Mamre. The cave is in the field that Abraham bought from Ephron the Hittite. He bought it so as to use it as a grave. v14 When Joseph had buried his father, he returned to Egypt with his brothers. And all those people who had gone with him returned to Egypt. Verse 7. The inhabitants of Egypt gave great honor to Jacob. The reason was that Jacob was Joseph's father. And Joseph was the most important person in Egypt apart from Pharaoh. Verse 10. The farm of Adad was actually the threshing floor of Adad. A threshing floor is the part of a farm where people beat grain with sticks. That separates the seeds from the rest of the grain. Verse 11. Abel Mizraim means Egypt weeps. Verse 13. They did as Jacob had said. See Genesis 49:29. Joseph's promise to his brothers. v15 After the death of their father, Joseph's brothers said, "Perhaps Joseph will hate us. Perhaps he will punish us for all the evil things that we did to him." v16 So they sent a message to Joseph. They said, "Your father commanded us before he died." v17 He said, "Say to Joseph, please forgive your brothers' faults and their evil deeds. I know that they did evil things to you. So please forgive the evil deeds that we have done. Remember that we are the servants of your father's God." Joseph wept when they spoke to him. v18 Joseph's brothers also came to him and they fell down in front of him. They said, "We are your servants." Verse 15. Joseph had forgiven his brothers. He did not blame them for what they did. He showed this clearly, by what he said. See Genesis 45:5 and the comment. And he showed it by what he did. See Genesis 47:11-12. But the brothers were still not sure that Joseph had forgiven them. We may sometimes be like the brothers. We may not be sure whether God has forgiven us. But God forgives all those who come to him. He shows this clearly, by what he says in the Bible. And he shows it by the help that he gives to us. If we forget this, we may ask, has God really forgiven us? We should always trust him. Verse 16. We do not know whether Jacob actually said this. Probably the brothers were lying. Verse 17. Joseph wept. Joseph had already forgiven his brothers, but his brothers did not trust him. Joseph wept because they did not trust him. Verse 18. Initially, the brothers sent a message. See verse 16. They also came themselves. See verse 18. V19. But Joseph said to them, do not be afraid. I am not a judge, as God is. V20. You intended to do evil things to me. But God intended to do good things. The purpose of his plan was to keep many people alive. And they are alive today. V21. So do not be afraid. I will provide for you and I will provide for your children. And so, Joseph took away his brothers' fear and he comforted them. Verse 19. The brothers had asked Joseph to forgive them. See verse 17. But Joseph did not say, I forgive you. He had already forgiven them, many years before this time. Verse 20. The things that had happened were a part of God's plan. Joseph realized that, and so he did not blame his brothers. Instead, he praised God. Joseph dies. V22. So Joseph lived in Egypt. He and his father's family lived there. And Joseph lived for 110 years. V23. Joseph saw Ephraim's grandchildren. The children of Machir, who was Manasseh's son, were born on Joseph's knees. V24. And Joseph said to his brothers, I will soon die. But God will be with you and he will bring you out of this country, Egypt. He will bring you to the country, Canaan, that he promised. He promised it to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. V25. Then Joseph made Israel's sons give him a firm promise. Joseph said, with God's help you shall carry my bones away from here. V26. So Joseph died when he had lived for 110 years. The doctors embalmed Joseph's body. And they put Joseph's body in a box in Egypt. Verse 24. Many years after Joseph's death, Israel's descendants left Egypt. They crossed the desert and they entered Canaan. And they overcame the people who lived in Canaan. Verse 26. For embalm. See the comment on verses 2 to 3. Nearly 400 years after this time, Israel's descendants left Egypt and they went to Canaan. They took Joseph's mummy with them and they buried it in Canaan. See Exodus 13:19 and Joshua 24:32. Exodus follows Genesis in the Bible. Exodus describes how God's people left Egypt. And it tells how they began their journey to Canaan. Word list. Altar. A table where one burned an animal as an offering to God. An altar is usually several large stones that form a pile. Angel. A servant of God who brings messages from heaven. The Hebrew word that means angel also means messenger. Blessing. A father's prayer for his sons before the father died. God sometimes showed the father what would happen to the son. And so the blessing said what would happen in the future. The blessing of the oldest son was extra important. It showed that the oldest son took his father's place as the head of the family. The word blessing also has other meanings. Canaan. The country where the Canaanites lived. See Canaanites. It is approximately the same land as the modern country Israel together with the land of the Palestinians. Canaanites. Canaan's descendants. Canaan was a grandson of Noah. See Genesis 9:18. The word Canaanites included Amorites and Hivites and other nations. See Genesis 10:16-17. It sometimes also included other people who lived in the country Canaan. These people were not descendants of Canaan. Chariot. A cart that has two wheels. One or two horses pull it. It can move fast. Some important people rode in chariots. Armies used chariots of a different kind when they fought. Command. To tell people or a person that they must do something, to say to people or to a person something that they must obey, to control by means of commands. A command is an order that one must obey. Cupbearer. A person who provided the wine that the king drank. He gave the king's cup to the king whenever the king drank. Descendants. Children and grandchildren and later members of the family. Donkey, an animal like a small horse. Donkeys can carry heavy loads on their backs. People ride on them. Famine, a period when crops do not grow. It may last for several years. There is a serious lack of food. Goshen, a district that was a part of Egypt. It was on the east side of Egypt. A canal brought water to it from the river Nile. It was good land for sheep and cows. Few Egyptians lived in Goshen. Most of the Egyptians lived on land that was good for crops. The Hebrew people were Abraham and his descendants. The ancient Hebrew language is the original language of Genesis. It is also the original language of most of the Old Testament, the first part of the Bible. This language is like the modern Hebrew language, which people speak in the country Israel today. Hittites, one of the tribes that lived in Canaan before Abraham went there. A lord is a person who has authority. The Lord means God. It is a translation of God's name. The Hebrews wrote God's name as Yahweh. We may write it as Yahweh. Lord, a person who has authority. Messenger, someone who brings a message. Offering a gift to God. An offering may be an animal. People killed the animal and burned it on an altar. Pharaoh, every king of Egypt was called Pharaoh. It was not one king's name. Pregnant, a woman is pregnant when she has a baby in her tribe, a large group of people who are relatives of each other. Judah's descendants were called the tribe of Judah. In a similar way, each of the 12 sons of Israel became a tribe. But Joseph's descendants were not called the tribe of Joseph.